The cool breeze brushed against my skin, carrying with it the distant scent of the sea. I adjusted the strap of my backpack, glancing at the horizon where the sun was beginning to dip, casting golden hues over the water. It had been years since I'd last visited the Lighthouse, a place that had once been our secret haven. Naveen walked beside me, his hands tucked into the pockets of his worn jacket. The years had been kind to him, I thought, stealing a quick glance at my friend. His features had matured, but there was a familiar softness in his eyes, a warmth that time hadn't dimmed. Yet, there was something unspoken between us, a tension that lingered like a storm on the horizon. We approached the lighthouse slowly, our footsteps crunching on the gravel path. The structure stood tall and weathered, its white paint peeling in places, but it remained a steadfast sentinel against the encroaching sea. It had witnessed our childhood escapades, our whispered secrets, and now, it seemed to stand witness to something new. "I can't believe it's still here," Naveen murmured, breaking the silence. His voice was tinged with nostalgia, and he ran a hand through his hair, the gesture familiar yet distant. "Yeah," I replied softly. "Feels like it hasn't changed at all." We climbed the steps leading to the entrance, the wood creaking under our weight. Inside, the air was cool and carried a faint scent of salt and decay. The silence between us felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken words. Each step seemed to bring us closer to an inevitable conversation, one that had been postponed for far too long. When we reached the top, the view took my breath away. The ocean stretched out endlessly before us, its surface shimmering under the golden light of the setting sun. The sight was both familiar and new, a reminder of the passage of time and the constancy of the sea. Naveen leaned against the railing, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I used to think we'd never grow up," he said quietly, "that we'd stay here forever, just the two of us." I felt a pang of something, regret, longing, I couldn't quite name it. "Things change," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Naveen turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. "Do they have to?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I looked away, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know how to answer, didn't know if I could. We stood in silence for a long moment, the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below filling the void. Finally, Naveen spoke again, his voice low and hesitant. "I missed this. I missed us." My breath hitched. I turned to face him, my eyes searching his face for something. Reassurance, understanding, I wasn't sure. "I missed you too," I admitted, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Naveen took a step closer, the distance between us shrinking. His eyes softened as he reached out, brushing his fingers against mine. The warmth of his touch spread through me, sending an unexpected thrill racing through my body. "Then why did you leave?" he asked, his voice tender yet filled with a quiet ache. The question struck me like a blow. I looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "I thought it was the right thing to do," I said quietly. "For both of us." "Was it?" Naveen pressed, his voice filled with a mix of frustration and longing. "Because it didn't feel like it. Not to me." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I didn't have an answer, not one that would make sense. I had left because I was scared. Scared of what I felt, scared of what it meant. "I don't know," I finally admitted, my voice barely audible. "I don't know what's right anymore." Naveen stepped closer, his face now inches from mine. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, and every nerve in me seemed to tighten with anticipation. His hand moved slowly to the back of my neck, his fingers brushing my skin in a way that felt deliberate, lingering. My breath caught in my throat. "I don't care what's right," he whispered, his lips almost brushing my ear. "I care about you." The words hit me like a wave, drowning out everything but the pulse of my heart and the intoxicating warmth of his body so close to mine. I took a step forward, closing the space between us, and for the first time, I allowed myself to hope. Our lips met, tentative at first, as if we were both testing the waters. But the moment they touched, something deep inside me awakened. I felt a rush of emotion that I hadn't expected, a longing, a connection, a need. His arms encircled me, pulling me closer, and I responded instinctively, my hands threading through his hair, tugging him closer still. The kiss deepened, more urgent now, as if every touch, every sensation was an affirmation of something we had both denied for too long. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and dazed, I found myself searching his eyes, seeking some sort of reassurance, some sign that this wasn't a fleeting moment. "I'm here," he said softly, his voice low and steady. "And I'm not going anywhere." The words wrapped around me like a promise, and I knew then that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. Over the next few weeks, Naveen and I found ourselves drawn back to the lighthouse time and time again. It became our sanctuary, a place where we could talk openly, away from the prying eyes of the world. We shared our fears, our dreams, our regrets, and slowly, the walls we had built around ourselves began to crumble. I learned things about Naveen I hadn't known before, the struggles he had faced, the sacrifices he had made, and in turn, I shared my own vulnerabilities, the fears that had driven me away. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary, and with each conversation, we grew closer. One evening, as we sat on the steps of the lighthouse, watching the stars appear in the night sky, Naveen turned to me, his expression serious. "Do you ever think about the future?" he asked. I nodded. "All the time." And I hesitated, my gaze fixed on the horizon. "I don't know. I used to think I had it all figured out, but now, everything feels uncertain." Naveen reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Uncertainty isn't a bad thing," he said softly. "It means there's room for possibilities." I looked at him, a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "You always were the optimistic one." Naveen chuckled, the sound warm and familiar. "And you were always the realist. We balance each other out." My smile widened, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. We sat in silence, the sound of the waves our only companion, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, the future didn't have to be so scary after all. As the months passed, Naveen and I navigated the complexities of our relationship with care and patience. There were moments of doubt, moments of fear, but there were also moments of joy and connection that made it all worth it. We began to rebuild the life we had once shared, creating new memories to replace the old. We explored the town, revisiting familiar haunts and discovering new ones. We spent lazy afternoons at the beach, the sound of the waves a soothing backdrop to our conversations. And through it all, the lighthouse remained our anchor, a symbol of our journey. One evening, as we stood on the lighthouse's balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Naveen turned to me, his expression serious. "I want you to know something," he said softly. I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is it?" Naveen took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering. "I love you, Kieran. I've loved you for as long as I can remember." The words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. I felt a lump form in my throat, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. I reached out, taking Naveen's hand in my own. "I love you too," I whispered, the words carrying the weight of years of unspoken feelings. In that moment, under the fading light of the sun, we found a sense of completeness we had both been searching for. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real, and it was ours. The days turned to weeks, and our bond deepened further with each passing moment. We would steal hours away from the world, hidden in the embrace of the lighthouse, exploring not just each other but the histories and dreams that made us who we were. Naveen shared stories of his travels, of the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned, while I told him about the quiet solace I had found in my years away. It was a dance of rediscovery, each revelation drawing us closer. One afternoon, we decided to refurbish the old lighthouse. Together, we painted the walls, laughing and teasing as specks of white paint found their way into our hair and clothes. Naveen insisted on fixing the old lantern mechanism, a project that consumed his weekends but left him beaming with pride when it finally worked. The lighthouse began to transform, not just into a monument of our past, but a beacon of our shared future. In the evenings, we would sit on the balcony, the newly restored light casting a gentle glow around us. It was during one such night, as the stars shimmered above and the world seemed to hold its breath, that Naveen turned to me with a question that took me by surprise. "Kieran," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "have you ever thought about what it would mean for us to be seen? Not just here, in our little world, but out there?" I hesitated, the weight of his words settling over me. The world outside our sanctuary felt vast and unyielding, a place where judgment often overshadowed understanding. I admitted, "and it scares me." Naveen reached out, taking my hand in his. "It scares me too, but I don't want to hide. Not anymore." His words resonated with a truth I had been avoiding. The love we shared, though forged in the privacy of our lighthouse, was too profound to remain confined. Slowly, we began to step out of the shadows, introducing ourselves as a couple to those closest to us. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of discomfort, of resistance, but there was also overwhelming support and love that reaffirmed our decision. We started small, hosting dinners for friends and sharing stories of our journey. Naveen's parents, though initially taken aback, came to embrace us wholeheartedly, their home becoming another refuge for us. My own family, ever pragmatic, offered quiet acceptance that grew warmer with time. As the years passed, we found ourselves drawn to the lighthouse less as a hideaway and more as a reminder of how far we had come. It became a place to celebrate milestones, birthdays, anniversaries, even quiet Sundays spent in each other's company. The once abandoned structure now stood as a testament to resilience and love, a physical embodiment of our journey. One summer evening, as we sat on the steps of the lighthouse watching the waves, Naveen leaned close, his voice soft and filled with emotion. "I don't know what the future holds, Kieran, but I know I want it with you. All of it." Tears welled in my eyes as I turned to him, the depth of his words settling into my heart. "Me too," I whispered. "Always." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of hope and promise, I knew we had found something rare and beautiful, a love that had weathered the storms and come out stronger, a bond that would continue to guide us through the uncharted waters of life.